Hello, friends, and welcome to our Conversations with Interesting People, which we are now going to
Oh,
have regularly. Yes, yes, Neil, you are an interesting person.
thanks.
This month's edition of Conversations with Interesting and Creative People is with Neil Degraide of Dirt Poor Robins. Dirt Poor Robins has the the absolutely unique distinction of being the only band that I listen to. Um, in other words, the only music that I listen to that is post roughly 1650.
That's quite a jump in time.
Yes,
We
I'm
are
only
only
slight.
anchored to the present.
I'm only slightly kidding. I'm a classical music guy, and I prefer to listen to things that are quite old. But
Yeah, same.
I happen to I don't remember how I found your music. It must have been just because you're active on Jonathan's page on Facebook or his group on Facebook, and um, I think you were doing some promotional work for your for
Yeah, I think you
y-
reached out to me after he had me on his channel once. So
yeah, I think that's
I
what it
think
was.
that's
And
when we
well, and
connected.
I listened to some of the songs on YouTube, and I'm like, this is really great. This is operatic. It's very musical, and the lyrics are wonderful. And I love both you guys' voices. I think they're just fantastic. So,
Oh, thanks.
um,
And I was a fan of yours when you had reached out to me, so it was perfect.
there you go,
um,
Matt.
Perfect timing. So I was already aware of who you were. So I was like, oh, this is great. I like this guy. Things are happening in my world. I think that there's might be a reason you resonate with some of what we're doing is because I'm trying. I listen to classical and older stuff, and I love operas. I love the idea of having libretto for the
Yeah.
music, a story to go along with
Mm-hmm,
it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I'm using classic themes, and I'm using I'm pulling from that same repertoire. I'm just doing it with in a modern context. So I think that that's where you might find a little like a kindred spirit in the music somehow. But some people just totally, who don't touch classical music have no clue and still listen to us and enjoy it. And we seem to appeal to generally more creative types, like in general, people who I mean, I remember when the movie Moulin Rouge came out and our band
Yeah,
was out, and there was something about that aesthetic where it was
yeah,
100% shot. If you liked that movie and the aesthetic of the movie, you were going to like our music. It was it
yeah,
was just
yeah,
we
yeah,
noticed it was
yeah.
more of a personality type than a particular demographic. So there you are. So
No, it's. I mean, it's that's an interesting thing that you say that it does fit in my mind. Having watched that movie a long time ago, but now I can see how it works. But really, what struck me most was the fact that um that your albums tell a story. Is you're not just interested in getting that perfect groove of the music, that perfect um, combination of chords or whatever. It's a lot more than that. It's you treat the entire album like it's a self-contained story. Is that something that comes to you before or it
yeah,
happens during
yeah.
the process, and how does that work?
I've always been a sucker for any kind of project that had some sort of world building in
Mm,
it, right? Where so that has always been a thing for me. And so as a band, we've kind of had our world. That's this. We deal with liminal spaces and marginal things, and we when we started off, it was kind of a carnival aesthetic
yeah,
and sort of steampunk, but steampunk really wasn't a thing back then. That was being labeled, or there were like conferences, or that was a category. Now I think it's like a category on Spotify.
yeah, yeah,
So I like that stuff. There was something about it where, as a creative type, I grew up with less of a disgust reflex for things I didn't understand, and things that were different. I generally, to my downfall, it sometimes had curiosity for things that were outside. And so that just became reflected in the music as I saw the world sort of becoming more and more this hybridity and mixture. It was almost like I wanted to use that to kind of to reestablish good story, like from that space, and work backwards from it. I think that's what was happening intuitively. So part of the problem is when we talk about any of this stuff, it just everything hits me as an image and an intuition, and I
yeah.
push things around until they feel right, and generally they come to me very quickly, and I start working right away. So but I can critically analyze it, and I will at points when things are wrong if I'm totally stuck, but otherwise I just try to stay in a flow state and go on pure intuition and try to find something that's striking and compelling to me, and then I just hope there's other people like me.
So you write all of the lyrics and the music yourself, or do you, is it a collaborative process with your
No,
wife?
so what
How does it
happened
work?
is, I give you a little backstory. So people don't know. Basically, the band. There's been other players that have come in and out, but the band has always been Kate and I. Kate is my wife. Kate and I met in. We were cast on opposite coast for a musical to play
Yeah.
leads. And so I don't want to get into the story. It's a funny story, but I ended up auditioning for a musical because I was hitching a ride with a friend and they were on some sort of nationwide search for the male lead. And I had zero interest in being in a musical at this point. I had been in musicals, I did it all throughout high school. I really wasn't that kind of singer, but when I auditioned, it was a strange audition because there was a lot of people in the room. And generally, it's not how they go. And it was in an old church in New England
Oh,
and my friends were in the room who brought me and I hadn't even prepared anything and I just goofed off and tried to get my friends to laugh in the audience and goofed around with the panel and somehow it registered as confidence and charisma to these people.
yeah.
And I got a call back the next day. They're like, congratulations, you get the part. And I was like, I don't want the part. I'm really flattered, but I'm not interested in it. And then the gentleman who wrote the musical, and was they were trying to take it to Broadway into London. It was very, very good musical. I was like the material was fantastic. That was not the problem. I just had zero interest in musicals. And so anyway, there the guy talked. He's like, "Hey, listen, you're going to want to do this because the girl who's the lead we cast, I cast you. I mean, he said, I think there were better singers, but you fit so well with her. You guys are probably going to get married. You're going to want to marry her. I know that."
Oh my gosh.
And he did the weirdest pitch and he has this very like gentle droning voice. And I was like, all right, I'll give this a shot. I could always quit, I suppose, if I early on, if I want to drop it. But it was Kate, it was my wife that was
Wow.
cast. And it was kind of like pre-internet days. So it was like I couldn't look up a headshot to see if I thought she was cute or not.
Right, right,
So
right.
but we met and dang, he was right. And so we started a musical theater together. And immediately that's where music started going together. So Kate clearly when we met was the better songwriter who could write a whole song. Um, she was a better lyricist. I didn't even touch lyrics back then. I wouldn't even try. I would always leave it to someone else. And she was a better lyricist and I wrote hooks. I wrote hooks and grooves and arrangements and I did that kind of stuff. And over time that changed. Over time, like the bug bit me. And it was really like, I mean, we talk about like Jonathan's channel and stuff. It was when I got into this sort of symbolic mindset approaching around 2007, 2008, where I started to this is a word that no one ever says right the first time, mythologize. I don't know why. Like I always pause when I go to say mythologize, but I was just taking life and mythologizing it and putting it in songs and I was writing into stories. And I just hit a spot where it was like I wasn't looking for ideas anymore. They were just I couldn't keep up. I couldn't keep up with the ideas. And that's when it took off. So suddenly I had like I was a terrible student in school. I had no ability, even in prose, I was terrible. I was a scattered with speech. I'd stutter at times, and like I had just didn't have this linguistic gift at all. And then like it just hit me, and then suddenly words made sense and how to use them. And then like Kate helped me with this. So she was like I would write something and she's like, that's the right idea, but this word right here
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
doing nearly enough. And she would pick a different word, just one word. And then that one word I would branch off. And then I started completing my metaphors, following my metaphors through, finding out all kinds of ways I could implicitly put an image in the audience's head by, kind of the negative space in the lyrics and
Yeah,
or
yeah,
where
yeah, yeah.
those words are normally used. And so it suddenly became a craft to me immediately. And I feel like it wasn't like something I had to learn. It just like someone gave me a couple of things and it was like, boom, I'm writing lyrics now. And so I write.
That's really fascinating what you're saying about the negative space around the words that you write, because as I was listening to your latest to your latest record before Queen of the Night, um, especially the storytelling interludes. I keep thinking that you're referencing something that I forgot. It's this really weird and interesting feeling. Like this is a story that I must have heard at some point, or at least it's referencing this. It's referencing something that is on the tip of my tongue, and I can't remember what it is. But it's not, of course. It's you've made something up whole cloth. So that's a fascinating ability to have, where you create an entirely original piece of work that also seems to resonate with something that exists in a kind of mythological space. Like, oh, I think I know this, but where do I know it from? So where do you get those ideas? Do you read a lot? Do you watch things, like, or does it just come to you?
I'm so happy to be talking to you right now because that's one of the few things I do intentionally that I think people get implicitly, but they don't.
Mm.
Nobody's ever said it back to me like you just did, and I'm like, I don't
Ah.
tell people I'm doing that. Okay, so thank you for
You're
one. So
welcome.
like this is worth the talk right now. Okay,
Yes.
so I wrote it into a song. I and there's a song called Theodora on there,
Yeah,
and
it's one of the best ones.
thank you. And the first line is, "You remind me of a girl I've been trying to remember my whole life, but I never met her until I met
Yeah.
you."
Nice.
And that's every time I encounter something beautiful, it's like that. It's like when I read Saint Ephrem's hymns on paradise, it was like it
Yeah.
reminded me of something I've been trying to remember forever, and like
Oh,
I'd never heard it said. It's just that the logos, it's there, it's everywhere, and it's in these things, right? And there's a way. I mean, there's a way. Like sometimes I'll be reading something, and just a line hits you. Just a line hits you, and you're like, you don't know why it's true yet, but you know it's true.
yeah.
And so I was like, I want to live in that space. I want to be explaining back to people what they find beautiful somehow, right? So that's something I actually try to do. And there's it's weird because I'm not very formulaic, but I can give you a little bit of a formula I
Yeah.
use for this. Okay. And I never give out these things, but I will. It's a stupid
Yes.
one. It's super easy to remember. I know anybody can use this. I'm really not like, I don't even care if people steal my stuff most of the time. Like I don't think we don't have the proper framework. We don't have the proper framework for intellectual property right now in this world.
Yeah.
So the process is the same thing a bride does when she's picking what she has for a wedding, where something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. Okay.
Okay.
It's just super easy. So something old, right? So I look for something timeless. So any of these tropes. So like in Dead Horse, I actually borrow from a Native American myth because it's very reminiscent, sort of like of the Firebird myth, and these myths that have this overlap with Christianity,
Yeah.
and the Thunderbird, and this cosmic battle between the Thunderbird and the underwater panther. So I borrowed that, and I made that part of the center point of the story. And so really, like the underwater panther is like this energy we've been pulling out from the earth, and has become this massive distraction in consumerism, like the oil of Prudhoe Bay in the north.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the Thunderbird is meaning re-injecting itself back into this world that's losing its way. So it is constantly battling this thing from below. So I use that. That's old. And then something new is sometimes it's just something new for me. So like there's a lot more synth work, and actually that record pulls a little bit from like some 80s and synthwave stuff at the
Yeah.
same time, and some
Yeah.
progressive record stuff I've never accessed before. Our previous record, The Raven Locks, did not really access those things very much. And so something new for that, and new story, brand new story. Like I hadn't heard this story before. I thought I had some unique ideas for it. And I wanted the story really not to be super explicit. I wanted it to be sort of this implied thing. And then, because what people fill into their head sometimes is so much more interesting. Like I remember when I used to listen to like Pink Floyd, The Wall, or Dark Side of the
Yeah.
Moon, or
Yeah.
some concept records where you don't know what the heck it's about, and whatever you're putting in your head.
It feels so interesting. Whatever's going on, it's like it's
Yeah,
on the
you're
tip of
like,
your
oh
tongue,
man, this
right?
is important. Like I don't know
Yes,
why, but
yes,
it's important.
yes.
So that's something new. Something borrowed is in nearly every arrangement. I will find something. It might be a groove. It might be something. So I'll give you one example. I remember I used to love Led Zeppelin when I was younger, and I loved the sound of John Bonham's drums, and they always sounded big to me. And now they're not big by today's standard, but they're big compared to everything else at the time. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I want to record now something that captures how that felt when I heard it back then. So it's going to be bigger. And so I'll take something like that, and I'll be like, oh, okay, I really loved that this song did that. Let me do that in a song without copying the melody or whatever. Now, but another version of that is, if there's a couple of songs I borrow from Wizard of Oz, not the hugest overall story fan of The Wizard of Oz. I don't necessarily love that universe, but there's things about the way that movie was made that are so good.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and the songs that were written for it. So there's a song called Scarecrows on Dead Horse, and I totally borrow from If I Only Had a Brain in that song. Um,
okay.
so I even hint at the melody a couple times, and people don't really pick up on it. But anyway, that's part of what it reminds you of. And then, sorry, the last thing is Something Blue. And so Something Blue I take to mean like soulful, emotional content. If it doesn't move me in a direction emotionally, um, I throw it away. Like, so it's not worth it. It's not worth it unless I think of a director, so I get to meet and work with Mel Gibson a little bit back in over a decade ago, before he was a pariah for a little while.
Yeah,
And you could just tell, like, he had this sense, and I wanted to capture it, but he was like, if there's going to be a villain, like, he's going to, like, put the corkscrew in you and turn it a couple of extra, as many notches as you could believe that he would turn, until you were just, wanted to tear that villain's head off.
yeah,
And he had such a good sense about that. And so emotionally, I always try to take things farther than I can without them, as far as I can without them falling apart. So that's my blue part of it. So whether it's the melody, I'm trying to make it strike me so hard that it's like I almost tear up. And I do that a lot when I'm creating. I'm a nerd. But and then the lyrics too, the same thing with the lyrics. Like I generally, so one of the things I really loved about iconography, this was way before I was Orthodox, was that there was like past, present, and future in every icon. It was like they were connecting Genesis and Revelation in the image all the time. It was like, whoa, this is, and then we're over here trying to appreciate art in a modern art museum, where the thing that's really at stake is someone's comment on someone else's movement over here. It's like this little inside joke. And then you look at iconography and it's like, oh, they're talking about the cosmos.
Yes.
They're like transcending time and space in this image. Like there's no comparison. I know exactly which one I want to do. I don't care about being cool. I don't care about being part of that like a cultural movement in that modern art sense. And so so blue content, like that was always important for me. So if it wasn't, and two, if you couldn't explain the story in some capacity to someone who lived 5,000 years ago, I don't think you don't have something that's transcendent. You just don't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you're saying effectively is that the more timeless your story, the more it hits those archetypal notes, the more likely it is to hit, even with those who have no idea that they're being told a story that is reflecting old archetypal models, which is not something that most storytellers nowadays think. I mean, I've been immersing myself in a lot of popular cultural stuff, streaming. There's a lot of sci-fi and fantasy stuff coming out right now, and the one thing that I'm coming away from more and more is that every single one of these stories, be it Wheel of Time, or Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the movie, or The Witcher, or any of these things or Foundation, these big stories that were the originals of which were always archetypal, were always fit into a certain kind of structure that anybody could have recognized at any point. And the adaptations of them, the storytellers seem to feel a need to dispense with that underlying that resonance. It's like, we don't need that. We want to push it away into a different direction. We want to press on, I don't know what. I mean, and it turns out that all of these things that are coming out, they're really superficial in their importance. Like, there's a lot of people are screaming. There's a lot of apparent important stakes, but at the end of the day, you're like, but what was it all for?
Yeah, no, I mean, oh my gosh, yeah. Like, I mean, that's a bigger part of what I do is, like, this will be released publicly. And so I have a way of, when I talk about my faith, I have to talk about it a certain way, because I think most people that follow us don't participate in my culture at all. And I don't want to say it like, I want to say it in a way that people can understand it. Right. Yeah. So but just so people know, when it was going through my head, when I'm listening to stories, or I'm listening to music, or I'm listening to someone argue about something, I'm asking, what's the point? What do you really believe about the world? Because most people's worldview, especially in politics and stuff like that, they don't jive with what they're saying. Like, they don't even have they don't even have a position that allows them to make a moral presupposition about any of the moral arguments they're having.
Yeah.
And so I see this and I'm like, man, we've got to get back to like something more genuine and more embodied in the human experience. We've been so detached from ourselves. We've had this basilisk of modern thinking that has just frozen and fixed everything in place in the most boring way, and it drove the muses from the stars, and it did all of these things to depersonify the world, and people wrote themselves out of it to the point where they think everything's in their head, and they're just random occurrence. And I listen to people talking, and I listen to people arguing, and I hear these things, and I'm like, listen, you're standing on top of a void for these arguments. Like, I don't know your position. I don't know your credential. Talk about the Wizard of Oz. Like, for example, in the beginning, like Auntie M, like the lady who plays the witch, but she's like someone busybody in town, is going to take Dorothy's dog and put it to sleep, right? And she's like, I have something to say to you. If I wasn't a Christian, she gives the credential for why she's not going to do the act down vengeance. And that's like, it's perfectly coherent when she says that.
Right.
Why? We know about turn the other cheek. We know, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. We know all of these Christian ideas that are out there. Love your neighbor as yourself. It makes perfect. She cites her credential and she says it.
Right.
We have a world with like so many assumed credentials. So, and people take so many things as a given, and they never think about who they were given by. Like a given means there's a giver. And so that's how I see it anyway. So I'm not telling you what to see necessarily when I talk about these things, but I'm saying this is the world I see. And I say in that context, if people want to know where I come up with my ideas from, it's like I see everything is connected, that everything it has a same best aim, a way to find unity in the world, and that really the better way to see this world as spirited and alive, that you have a place in it. Everything you encounter has a will. There's not just you in your head. There's all kinds of things you're hearing in your head. I mean, this is sort of like trying to say everything all at once, but you can't say that all at once. But I think that for artists, there is something internal. There's something that they need to get to the bottom of. We have all of these doors we've put up to our creativity, and it's there. Like, if you can get these doors open, there's no shortage of ideas, because all of human experience can be personified, mythologized. It can be turned into an incredible story and an incredible universe. It's waiting right there. When people don't have something to write about or talk about, it's there. But it's not in the political sphere right now. It's not in the education system. It's like what they're doing is the opposite of what I'm talking about. They're freezing everything. They're not bringing it to life. They're not enchanting it. They don't hear the music that the universe has to offer, and that they're a part of that, and they don't understand how to interact with it harmoniously. So it's there's a lot of chaos right now. And I mean, to be honest, as an artist and a musician, I think it means there's a ton of opportunity. It's like that salesperson who there's those two salesmen, that trope where they go to an island and they're shoe salesmen and nobody has any shoes on. And so the first guy reports back, this was a total waste of time. Nobody here wears shoes. And the second guy's like, this is the best move ever. Everyone needs shoes. So I see the world as everybody needs shoes. And so the door's wide open for people who want to open themselves up to creating.
Well, this is the thing, right? Because they have to realize that they're without shoes first, right? And this is what's so interesting to me, is that what you're talking about, this pattern recognition in the world, is something that actually should jive very well with the other thing that all young people want to do, which is self-author, right? This is the thing that everybody wants to do. We want to make our own identity. We want to make our own reality. We want to make our own sense of the world. But that freedom to do that is in a system that has formless and unlimited chaos will lead to madness only. And in actual fact, as soon as you start trying to self-author in the way that they imagine it's going to be so freeing, you can do only one of two things. One is you become overwhelmed with the choice, or two, you choose a template. But there are only so many templates available. And the more you look into the templates that are available, the more you realize that actually the template that you're probably going to choose is the one that the world is. right? It's not simply an act of self-authoring, it's an act of reflection of what the world actually is, something that
Well,
Jonathan
if you're
talks about
honest,
with
you're
that.
going to choose the one the world is.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a hack to appear, um, I don't know, virtuous to your friends and families, you
Yes.
might offer a political one and try
Yes.
to force it, right? So
Yes.
it
Yes.
depends on what you want to do. It's like, so I mean, anybody can build an image. That's the
Mhm.
thing. And so it's like, actually, paying attention to reality and engaging with it honestly is very painful and and
Yes, it can be.
arduous, but of course, in the end, more rewarding. So, yeah, I think that. Well, so when you talk about self-authoring too, it's so. I mean, this is something I've been breaking out of for 10 years. Is this individual focus of my
Yeah.
perspective or my take on things, and
Yeah.
um, I don't. I don't think that's how we'll ever get to any kind of unified
No, I
space
agree.
as
I agree.
people. So,
No, no,
but
I
yes,
agree.
you're right.
I
It
agree.
is a good spot. So I know an example of that is like, so there's two movies I watched recently. I just mentioned Wizard of Oz, and this is one that has the same story trope where it's like a reframing of the small life. So Dorothy has this big dream and adventures, and she wants to go out and see the world. And the movie sort of presents it in the end like that's kind of a sham, but home was where the real value was. And so that can be a great story, but it can also be a trick. So
Yeah.
I'll give you another example of that. It's A Wonderful Life. Like, okay, so It's Wonderful Life. Really, like every detail in that story is very well crafted. And I reference
Yeah.
this one because pretty much everybody knows the movie. And what's the main character? Jimmy Stewart's character. Anyway, it's
George
no
Bailey.
Bailey, right? So it's no mistake that he wants to be an adventurer when he's a kid,
Yeah.
and that gets taken from him, and he is stuck in this town, and he can't see the beautiful thing he's doing. And in the end, it's reframed where he sees that this has all been a wonderful life, and that the real adventure was at home.
Yeah.
Um, so cool, or also a trick, right?
Yeah.
We're in the trick right now. We're in that trick because there I've always kind of had more of that hippie spirit where I've always like wanted to live in a commune with people and like do something as a group and be communal. I'm communal oriented. I'm an extrovert and I love that. But like, more and more, it's like people are kind of okay with nothing, like nothing social and nothing meaningful. And, so the sad thing for me about, the last year and a half is that, oh, I don't know, the fact that other people going to your church, going to events, living a normal life isn't worth risking something over for
Yeah.
most people. Like like a lot of people, like it wasn't worth the risk. It's like I can nap more and I can stay home. I can play video
Yeah.
games.
It's kind of disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't even know why people are arguing about inequity anymore because everyone's doing the same thing. Elon Musk is playing games on his phone and watching the same shows you are when he goes to bed.
True.
It's
True.
like everybody's doing the same thing. And so there is a 20th century trick that happened with sort of that reframing. And so someone like, I never mentioned reference Jordan Peterson, but I think it's worth referencing because he has an interesting starting point is that it's a similar story he's telling to that story of, well, you get this adventure, well, start at home, right? Or do these little things that are in front of you well first.
Right.
But they're not the ending point, right? So it's like he's managed to successfully get a bunch of men and women to do what their parents couldn't, which is clean their room. Because why? He reframed it. Hey, you like, oh, mom's like, clean the room. You're like, why? Because I said so. You have to clean your room. The kids are like, I don't want to. Jordan Peterson's like, hey, you want to destroy the dragon of chaos?
Right.
Clean your room. And
Yes,
you're like,
I do.
oh, I do. I'll clean my room. And so the whole point of appreciating the small things is that that's the first step to moving out into bigger things. And so I think that's that's one of the things as a storyteller right now is part of what's blue for me in stories is a call to adventure for people,
Mhm.
right? Is to, you don't want to overlook the people around you. That's not because they're your starting point. If you don't love your family, your brother and your sisters well, you don't love the mailman who comes to your door and treat them well, and the people you see every day well, forget about moving on past that into the world. Of course, you have
Yeah.
to get that right.
Yeah.
But that's not the ending place. The ending place is not you. It's not an individual. It's a community in the end. It's being able to move out and be of value to a community.
Well, what you're saying is really, really interesting to me. I've been thinking about this a lot because I did this video series last year about resilience and courage through storytelling. And it was intended to be a kind of call to action for people who are suffering in the pandemic. And here, look at these fairy tales, look at these heroic quest structures that we have out there, and get strength from them, because it can show you how you can go out into the wilderness, even though you are one, even though you are weak, even though you are isolated, and you can acquire great strength through that battle with yourself out in isolation. And at that moment, when we all had the common enemy, it was a resonant message. But over the past year, I've been looking around, I've been noticing that there's been a lot of resistance, more and more, to the idea of, I need to go out there by myself and in isolation go out and slay the dragon on my own.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people tend to look at the heroic quest as a solipsistic exercise that necessarily means breaking community. And oftentimes these are people who don't like male toxicity and things like this, right? So they see this as an expression of kind of masculinity gone rampant, even if it's not only men who are intrigued by the quest structure. So what you're saying to me is really interesting, because what you're talking about in some sense is two story structures at the same time. One is the heroic quest, which is all about finding your inner meaning, but it's also about coming back and transforming your community through that knowledge gained out in the wilderness. But if you are not integrated into the community at the beginning, your going out of that community is not going to be particularly useful to the community, because you weren't a member of that community to begin with. You were already alone. So, and this is what's happening to a lot of people. A lot of people are like grabbing onto the heroic structure and going, okay, I can be a hero of my own story. And I like these heroic story structures, and I'm going to live them out. But they do it without reintegrating back into the return to the community and transforming the community along with themselves. So you have to start in some sense with the original story, which is about rooting yourself into a larger community. And only after you've established that story of family, that story of connection, that story of I am one among many,
Right.
only then can the heroic journey have that deep emotional resonance of, I am first torn away from this because I have to go out into the wilderness to slay the beast.
Yes.
But it also includes the beauty of the return, because everybody is enriched by your return, because they want you to come back, and you do as well. So we need both of those stories.
Well, you're so right. And so the thing that what I'm afraid of is that the message of culture and the way that people are being trained, and they're really trained to follow their appetites, is that there is a sense of community, but the community is there to be a mirror to them of what they want to see.
Yes.
Right. The community is not, you're not there. You're not sacrificing for the community. You only sacrifice so they can see you sacrificing. Right. So
that's right. Virtue signal.
So, yeah, baby. And I mean, we're really, really hitting the edge of that now, where people are demanding the rest of the world accept what they say they are, right? Because that's they don't want to earn it. They don't want to earn that amen back from the crowd, right? They want to tell the crowd, you have to say amen, and so that's really, I feel like, one of the important aspects of art. It's like, I mean, if you're going to make art, you've got to find a way to shake people up and flank them and surprise them with beauty, so that they can maybe see these things for the first time, because they're not going to they're going to lose it all if they stay where they are. Are you losing my internet right now? It's being a brat.
A little. It's being a little bad, but yeah.
How dare it? Let me shut everything off in the world. Okay, so so I think that's a problem where people think I'm community focused, and it's like,
no,
I mean, okay, so something I think about a lot. So we'll get into let's get into talking about a couple of sacred things I think influenced me, but on a I guess a more broad set of terminology to use it, because I can start talking about the Holy Spirit, for example, and it's a very hard thing to talk about sometimes, but and to someone on the outside of our tradition, that's just a magical word, or and I see it as something that's far beyond my understanding, but also something I interact with practically. So part of the part of what the Holy Spirit does is, as well. So here's how I see it. I don't know if many Christians will describe it this way. So actually, let me back up a little farther because this has something to do with you.
Okay.
Because when I was looking, I was going to be chrismated in the Orthodox Church. I was looking for a patron saint, and I'd read up on a lot of saints and trying to look for some affinity. And then some of them scared me because they were so disciplined and so prolific and even rhetorically like powerful. And then when it came to like true social justice, they were so giving, and it's just like these people are terrifying when you think about that you're going to hold yourself up against this and try to, it just absolutely horrifying. And so, but you had, well, hey, how about Saint Basil the Great? And I was like, oh, that works nice because my last name is Degraide, and that if my middle initials B already, it's Basil Degraide. It sounds like Degraide. I was like, that was funny, but I was like, okay, that was the push I needed because I was kind of afraid of Basil.
Yeah.
That's a weird thing to
scary
say.
guy for sure.
Well, okay, so anyway, my wife bought me a bunch of books by him and had put them on the shelf, and then we got chrismated. The next day I was home, and all of a sudden, like a book jumped off at me on the shelf, and it was like it just boom. It was like. And so I might be a lunatic, but I was like, I felt like there's like this voice telling me, it's like, oh, where did this voice come from suddenly? Like, that's the book I need you to read.
Yeah.
And I was like,
no, you're not a lunatic. You're just a reader. It's fine.
Okay, fine. So anyway, so I pick up, I now it was St. Basil's on the Holy Spirit. Now I've never read anything slower. Like I've literally never read a book slower. I will hit a sentence and then I will put it down for a while until it really sinks in. So I've had some really neat thoughts on this because, St. Maximus the Confessor also has this. He explains the Holy Spirit in like so many different ways. And it at first it was so far over my head, but I felt like it was starting to sink in. And I was realizing this is like part of the artistic process we're talking about. Now, there are people out there that actually, interact with some of the things I'm talking about. I have no idea. So St. Maximus put like the Holy Spirit explained it through 4 different groups. Like one was the barbarians, which is a word we don't really use anymore.
Yeah.
But it was people
those
who
on
were
the margin. Yeah.
Yeah, the margin. They're the people that had more wild pagan traditions or were more lawless and didn't have as structured civilization. He talks about how that, even the barbarian benefits from the Holy Spirit's existence in the world, that it will draw them to reason and even a type of really practical pragmatism, right? So that so part of what the Holy Spirit's job is to help you transcend time. In the end of the day, this is a weird thing to say, but I mean, in the sense that like just being pragmatic is transcending time to a degree. So like even the simple, it's a terrible example, but like, when they give the kid the marshmallow and they say, hey, if you don't eat this for a minute, you have a second marshmallow. Now, this is stupid because this is teaching them how to exercise their appetites for more appetite gain, which I don't think is a great idea.
Yes.
But anyway, there are positive versions of that all the time, right? That's what your job is. It's like, I got to go do this thing I don't really want to do right now unless someone pays me, so I can have these things later and I can have food and blah, blah, blah. So you're learning to extend yourself into time. And so the categories, it goes from the barbarians to those who follow the law, to those who are initiated into Christianity, to those who through discipline have opened up these channels. So there's like this, the kind of picture I got from that was like this idea that we're like a complex maze of our inner workings. And there's and when they're saying someone has a wall up, I think that's a better way to think of that as a door. It's a door they won't open, right? Because even the barbarian, right, when presented like with this a voice of reason or a better voice to not act on his wild instinct, right? To maybe put that off for the benefit of others and himself to go a little farther into the future. So the part of the Holy Spirit is like, and people talk about this, like they might just talk about pragmatism. They might talk about all different types of philosophy, but the idea is here in a secular sense that one of the things it's helping you do is to not be stuck under your appetites in the present. Right. It's going to help you transcend time to eventually. So in Christianity, you got this ultimate pragmatism at work philosophically, which is the idea. What if you give up your whole life to gain eternity? Right. So it's the ultimate extension. You can't in a narrative structure, you can't push it further. Right. Well, there's this other side of it where it's also helping you transcend space. So space meaning not like outer space, but that's also part of space. I mean, space is any place. You could say place. That might be an easier word. So the idea that, so the Spirit of Christ goes into one body in the Christian story, and it comes through a virgin, and that's Christ, and he lives a life and he lives out a pattern in that life. This is a way oversimplification for those who don't know what I'm talking about, but he dies and he rises again, and then the Holy Spirit comes, right? So he makes a way for the Holy Spirit to come, and the Holy Spirit is doing the same thing in a much larger body, right? In a body that's not just a man, right? It is an entire, what we call the church. And so the idea of the church is that the Holy Spirit, like, so a lot of people, when you'll hear people talk about this, maybe in pop Christianity, it's more of this individualistic thing. It's more of this self-discovery that the Holy Spirit's job. But you cannot miss how it's getting you to transcend space is that you're interacting, you have a part in a body. So my pinky doesn't know what my eyes are doing right now, but it's all connected and it has a role. So the Holy Spirit is the means by which you are effective in a way you can't even see. And a really crude analogy of that is, yes, or a crude analogy of that is, when like two people get in a horse costume, and there's one guy who's the head walking around to see, and then you ever been the second person in the horse costume?
I can only imagine, but it must be awful.
But to make that bigger horse body, one of you can't see where you're going. That's right. And so the reality is, in the way I see it in Christianity, the way it's been taught to me is that most people in Christianity are that if they participate in Orthodox Christianity, they're actually part of this body, and the Holy Spirit's guiding them into being effective in a much larger body than they could ever fathom or do on their own. They're stuck in your normal human cognition, trying to figure out what's good for you in the moment or in the near future. And the Holy Spirit now connects you. It unifies you over a much larger group
without denying or canceling out your own individual action or individual pattern at the same time, which is what's so amazing about it.
Yeah. So hopefully anybody who hears this who wasn't a Christian, has hopefully a better description of what that is, whether you believe it or not. I'm just declaring what I understand. So that's important though, because when people talk about unity out there, right? And so this really impacts what I think beauty and art is if you want to participate, because what I just talked about is the end goal for mankind is for us to be brought together in peace and unity and love and beauty and these things, and so I see this as part of just my life as a Christian is to participate this in ways that are unknown to me. I'm being guided in ways that are hopefully helpful to a larger number of people and in ways that I could not do in my own power or see in my own power. So that's the transcending of time and space. So you have time in this sense, and the very secular way to be it is just this type of pragmatism. But so as an artist, though, like you're talking about, and you're talking about your podcast with these fairy tales and stuff, there's this thing that's happening in the story. There's this beautiful thing to grasp, to hold, to gain, and to possess and to share. And so as an artist, it's man, I just think of when I'm putting a song together, I'm thinking about, okay, so I can factually, and I can give someone a definition of what the problem is and write it down. So I can say, hey, don't be judgmental. Yes. All right. Or in just as many words, I could say, put down your gavel. And one's art. Right? Because one, you have a whole scene in your head. Yeah. It's no longer just, it's no longer just this imperative statement by someone else telling me what to do. It's inviting someone to see in which ways they're casting judgment and how they're playing that role. And so all of these little doors in people, hopefully when someone engages our music, if they don't understand it at all, but hopefully there's a softness to something better. There's all these walls you put up, and your family can't get through them, and your friends can't get through them. And there's walls I have, we call them walls, but I see them as doors. And the proper, beautiful art, that art that catches you by surprise, that art that you don't know why you can't get your mind off of it, that when you see it opening those doors, it's good. You're participating in the good, and what I see as part of the work of the Holy Spirit in the world. So I think those things are, for an artist, it's really important, because we think about, what do I want to say? What do I want to say? And it's I don't think that's what I should say. What do I want to say? It's I didn't go to college. Like I don't know what I have to say if it's any good, but hopefully I've been paying enough attention and have like an intuition to I don't know, experience some beauty for myself, figure out how to get that to strike someone else. I not try to explain them what the truth is, but just try to flank them with beauty in a way that helps them and they don't even know it.
Sure.
And especially because I'm so tired of the nihilism. I don't want to say nihilism because that sounds too close to my name. Nihilism, that's better. The nihilism in the world, and it's just being fed to people. It's so cruel. It's so cruel. Like people don't even, they think they're just the cold hard facts and these are the truth. It's like,
Yeah, no, it's
it's
not.
such a radical position, like
It really
even
is.
scientifically, and especially in the narrative world. Like the narrative
Yes.
world is a real dimension we live in,
Mhm.
and it's the fourth dimension we live in. And in the narrative, the nihilism is so radical. The only reason that someone would ever push it or adopt it is because they're too afraid to look at something else, or they're too afraid to open up to something because the prospects of reality are too terrifying for them to actually face
Exactly.
it. So they accept
Exactly.
this radical narrative
Yep.
and they just stuff it down people's throats constantly, even to the point where you're almost like bullied for not accepting this horribly abusive
Yep.
um, piece of rhetoric that only leads to internal suffering. It doesn't
No,
bring any
totally.
good about in the world.
So where
So
does then so this is easier to do with music because music is the language is a language that bypasses the objections of the mind very quickly. So even
yeah.
if you have music with lyrics, it's still easier to do it because you're accessing a much wider palette of colors and a much more
Mm,
complex lexicon of language. But
yeah.
now you're delving into a more difficult form of art, which is the visual. It's still connected with your music, but it's more dangerous because the visual palette is something that people are soaked with. So they have
Right.
much easier associations that happen immediately as soon as they see something, and it's much easier for them to turn off as soon as they sense that they're being preached at, right?
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
so what are you trying to do then with Queen of the Night? What is
I,
the creative impetus behind this?
so I never try to preach like in music. Like I never like if someone's like, "Oh, that's preachy," it's like, "Oh, that's the character being preachy." Like
Yeah.
it's literally not me. At the thing I do the most, I would say, if I'm telling people anything, I'm telling about the worst parts about myself. Sometimes, like this is like the fact that I understand this character or this thing that's kind of bad is because I know what that's like in firsthand, right? So I'm like, in a way, it's like an apology for being terrible. So no, okay, so visual, yeah. So the visual world, well, I mean, so it's a huge advantage. So let's just you pointed to something there with music. So music, I think this is important for people to understand because we don't understand music and why we like it or why it's even a spiritual thing. Because the word spirit comes up and people think it just means oh that which we can't explain, or they think it means like just something like oh something that someone uses to try to make something feel more important. I don't know what people have that word. I see it as something very practical. Like the spirit is things that are immaterial. They don't have they don't exist materially where we can point to them and
Yeah.
use our vision or our touch, to decide where they are.
Yeah.
Um, so the world presents itself. We look at the world and we learn names. We see objects and we name those objects. Right now, that's a form of pattern recognition, but we don't see it as that. We think we see objects, and then there are these larger patterns. So let's just take a pattern. There are political patterns. There are cycles. So like one of the things we're kind of talking around here is this idea of if you just look at the current culture, I think we're in the pattern of death, meaning that it's the end of a life for our culture.
Yeah.
And the reason I
I
say
agree.
that is because your day, so here's an example of a just regular old pattern reading. Your day is the same as a life. It has the same form.
Yes. Yes.
Your life has the same form as an age. Okay, so I'll give you an example of that. Like, in your day, in your life, you'll crawl, you'll school, you'll learn some basic things. So or even like the story of Genesis, there's a point where you're naked and you're not ashamed of it, and then suddenly you realize that there's some dangers in the world if you run around naked, and there's some
Right.
problems with that. So you grow up, you school, you have supervision, you hopefully move beyond the supervision, and you work, and then your work pays off, and you retire. And generally people in their retirement, those who just live the normal pattern of life kind of do recreational things. Okay, so your day is just like this. You kind of come to your senses, you get up, you prepare for your day, you go out and you do your work, you come home when the work is done, and you finish up the last little bits of work, and you do recreational things. So the time of day when people are most likely to drink is going to be night. The time of day when people are most likely to do something sexual is going to be night. The time of day when someone's more likely to play a game, to watch a show, to do nonsense type things is night. So the problem is, one of the things you're talking about where, people don't sense this call to adventure is because they don't see it. The work's done. Like, we're benefiting from so much work and so much technology now. Like, we don't, like, I don't know how to do anything around my house. Like,
Yeah.
there's someone for everything, and there's all kinds of technology that does everything for me. So that's why we can't see the call to adventure. Like, no, the inner need for that is the same, and that same purpose has been placed in our life, but it's just harder to see. So that's an example of a pattern you can discern over time. So when I look at our age and our culture, I see that we have more opportunity and are engaging in more recreational nonsense type activity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the reason all these other things exist that we stand upon aren't quite as apparent to us. People can't even see how much technology has affected their bodies. Like, they don't even understand, like, they don't know how to process a world where people don't have birth control. Like, they don't get it. Like, it doesn't, they see the ancient people as stupid because they don't understand they didn't have access to birth control.
Right.
And so they can't make the proper evaluation. So that's an example of a pattern. So patterns take time to see. Like, the patterns of life are implicit, right, at first, until you learn to see them. And so you learn the simple names. So we see these things first in life. This is how our waking life works. And this is how the visual world works. You see the thing, and the pattern is implied. Music goes flip, it does the opposite. So the pattern is explicit. That's what music is patterns. It's a bunch of patterns. And those patterns imply things. I could, even a very simple sense, you could listen to Peter and the Wolf, and the pattern of the music is implying characters and their actions, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why music is considered a spiritual art, because it's presenting the patterns, the immaterial aspects first, and then it just flips the script on it. So it's like, okay, so that's helpful to know when we're talking about these things. So understanding that as an artist, moving into visual, I actually started out as a visual artist. Like my first love was drawing. The problem is, in my life, I have probably 12 things I'm trying to master all the time. And my spiritual walk goes first in that, and being a husband, father, those are my like top three. Friend. Then I get into like, okay, I'm a composer, I'm a writer. I write lyrics, I write songs, I arrange music. I have a number of instruments I'm trying to master. I sing. I'm an engineer in the studio. I'm a producer. And then I have to figure out how to market myself after all that. It's stupid. Okay, it's stupid. That's the one of the plagues of the modern world, is that I don't get to do one
I know
thing.
about this problem. Yes.
Right. Yeah, I know you, because you're like a choir master, a deacon,
Please don't remind me of my roles. It's depressing.
So anyway, okay, so we have all these things trying to do. So I started out as a visual artist. That was my first love. So the thing I noticed about movies compared to music is that I was a kid, and I remember Michael Jackson was very popular, and he sold like 27 million records of Thriller, and 80% of the people I know never wanted to see Michael Jackson again, couldn't stand him, hated him. The other 20% was like, if he put out a record right now, I would buy it without even listening to it, right? So it was like, okay, so music and musical genres have a very polarizing effect on the world, especially the more popular they get, the more hated they are. And I've always embraced that about music. So I always tell people, I play guitar, I'm going to do a guitar solo. I'm not going to try to do a guitar solo for the person that hates guitar solos. I'm not. Like, I'm going to make sure I play guitar solo that they hate. Because now the person who loves the guitar solos, I put all the things in there that they love about them. So anyway, getting tangential now, but I'm going to get to it, I swear. So E.T. was out. And it was like, I couldn't find a person that didn't love E.T.
Yeah.
And same with Jurassic Park. When Jurassic Park was out, we're going Spielberg here for a minute. It was like, he just tapped into that thing. There was something about that where, now, like, listen, none of the people who watched E.T. and loved it, almost none of the people like Jurassic Park. And we know this because the stats are very low on classic musical music listeners, there are some
Yeah.
fantastic music and
Yeah.
compositions in those
Oh yeah.
films.
I mean,
And
that's
people are
that is classical music. That is the classical music of our time.
right.
Is
Yes, that's right.
I mean,
So we all accept it, and those movies are terrible without those songs.
yeah.
Like they're terrible. Like just I dare you like to put that on. So because music is that fourth dimension to these films. It's that it adds that level to the narrative. It colors the words and images in. So, but I'm like, if I can move into something imagistic, now I can. Well, and we needed content in the sense that we never make music videos. And I was like, man, you know what? I keep doing these stories. I'm just going to let people see it. People are always asking me what the stories are. I kind of let some people in on aspects. Most people, I'd rather just have it be a mystery. Now, I'm going to tell this story. I'm not really going to explain what things mean. I mean, that's not fun to people because I didn't really know what they meant when I wrote it. I wrote it very fast, but then I presented it to Jonathan Peugeot, and I was like, hey, you're going to be like one of my editors here. And you're going to tell me anything I'm presenting this incoherent. And he had none of that to offer. He was like, no, this is all super coherent. I get it. And then he explained it back to me, and I was like, whoa, that's pretty awesome. And then and then he added like, have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? One of the aspects he really helped me flesh out was the idea that the bottom of the ocean, that liminal space, is very similar to outer space, the way we see it and the way we interact with it. Even the fact that submarines are like rocket ships, there are stars on both places. They're connected. One reflects the other, like the sea reflects it, and then you need a spacesuit to go into both. It's like it's just crazy when you start to put it together. That the way the limits of our reality are so coherent. The only real difference is there's this crushing mass below of weight because there's too many things, and then above there's less material. Okay. So movie, I wanted to make a movie, and I think I did. I'm old enough now where I set the right task for me, because I can barely do this. Like I can barely do it. Like it's so much work.
Right beyond what is possible, so that you push yourself and stay.
I'm having to hustle, but and two, I set serious limitations. So like I don't have a ton of experience directing. I've directed commercials and other things in the past. I've been around a lot of directors. I think about these things. I watch like every behind the scenes thing on a movie, but I hadn't had a lot of experience with that. I haven't, cinematography, cameras, know nothing about them. Know nothing about them. Know how to evaluate it if it's good or bad, but that's it, right? So I'm like, I'm going to make a silent film, because now I don't have to worry about audio on the set. I don't have to, if I keep it true to an older style. No, it's no problem. I know you can still hear me. If I keep it true to an older style, I don't have to move the camera around.
Right.
We can shoot on a green screen, and I can hand make these backgrounds to achieve a very specific effect. So that was really by making a silent film, I thought that was the safest move forward, and it fit the story perfectly. So I was like, this is all like coming together. This is all doable, but it's going to be hard. And so we decided in the end to release it episodically. So have you seen episode 1? Okay, great. So episode 2.
I shared it with the Patreon as well. So.
Oh, great. Thank you. So episode 1's like a prologue. It's very different than the rest of the film. But it's, it's foundational to the film. It sets up, it does what a prologue is supposed to do. It sets up all the themes and presents the challenge, and the rest of it is the ripple effect from that event. So visual, I just thought like, I had to change the style of music we do. So we do that every record. We try to make it sound like us, but we try to do something we haven't done before. And so it's older. I'm not really going mono old cinematic recording on vinyl. Like I'm not doing it to that degree, but I'm pulling from themes and ideas that back then. And the movie, as it moves along, gets more and more into ragtime as things modernize the story. So it just felt like the right thing. It was like, okay, this gives me the chance for someone who kind of gets bored of pop music a little bit. I get kind of bored of the drums, especially. I get bored of the modern drumming. I think it's really dull. And I get really bored of highly metered music that's very rigidly onto a click. Like I just get it just, it's like and especially with all the computers people use, they edit stuff so much now. It's like nothing's at stake when you're listening. It's like,
well said. I like that.
Nothing's at stake. It's like, everything's going to land, everything's going to be in tune, everything's going to be on time. It's like, it's so much so that I forget to keep listening to the song. And I mean, that's one of, if you're a rock fan, like, and there's a part of me that's a rock fan. Like, part of the fun of a rock band is like they bring in things to the point where it should all fall apart, and it doesn't. It
Right.
somehow they stick the landing, and it was worth it. And so
Contain
that's the same
chaos.
with an orchestra. That's with everything good. So yeah, that's part of the fun of this, is that I wanted to tell a story that way, and I wanted to press into something new. And I think movies are garbage. Like, so many movies are bad. Like, I hate to say this as someone, like, I don't make fun of other music. Like, I don't really talk about other music being garbage much, but I think movies are, they've just become this, like this, the modern church's political sphere.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
and you can't get away from it. It doesn't matter what you're watching. There's going to be some idiotic comment that somebody makes that's a dig at some political reality. It doesn't matter if it's a far future sci-fi show, whether it's a fantasy world. There's always going to be something. It drives me up the wall. I just hate it.
well, it kind of annoyed me about my own story is that right after I wrote it and started to film it, like, this isn't get too big of a giveaway, but like Elon Musk and I hadn't been on my radar, but Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are like, and are racing to like the moon and Mars and
Yes.
stuff. And I was like, oh,
Yes.
that is my story.
Yes.
I did it again. I predicted it. No.
Well, the context is very different, but
Yeah, no, very different. It's not really about those things in the end.
yeah.
So so anyway,
They're not looking for for archetypal womanhood.
right.
They're looking for
No.
something else.
Yeah. So really, that's one of the things about these movies that, like, I put on Netflix series, and like by episode one, I know exactly what is going. I'm so bored. I know exactly what's going to happen because
Yeah.
I've already caught a whiff of the political slantings of this person, and so
Yeah.
this character needs to do this. This
Mhm.
girl will win every fist fight. Like, it's just like,
Mhm.
just boring. Like, I was happy to see the movie Arcane. There was the show Arcane. There was at least some give and take between the female characters and male characters punching each other.
Yeah, that one's on my list. I haven't watched it.
So but anyway, that's not what makes it good. Guys are finally hitting girls is good. No,
Yes.
that's not the world I want to live in. So
What have we
but
lived? This is the world, I guess.
yeah, I know, but it's funny that you even have to comment on these things. But
I know.
but it's so dull and so boring, and it's inescapable. And so I think Hollywood's crumbling. They don't know how to adjust after post-COVID reality and
No,
what's
they
going to
don't.
happen in theaters and budgets. And so I was like, it's my time. If I was ever going to make a movie, now is the time to make a movie. It might be too exhausting of a process. I might never make it again, but I'm going to give it my all while I make this one. I'm going to do my best at it. So hopefully it's a little respite for people who are tired of the political movies out there.
Well, no,
Hopefully
it'll be so different from what they're experiencing that I think they'll get, for those people who have access to it and actually allow themselves the pleasure of delving into that slightly old, slightly archetypal place of story that you access so
yeah,
often.
well, it's
They
highly
really,
archetypal. Yeah.
yes.
And so yeah, and that's it. Like, the story came to me like with it was about the power of femininity in a way that, like, I don't see it in movies. Like, I just don't, like, I haven't seen it since Galadriel in
Right.
in like Lord of the Rings. Is like, that was like, it was like the last one. And there's a power in femininity where the sadly, when now that there's more roles for women and more of a demand for roles for women, they're just giving them the same boring roles they gave guys, except actually sometimes I think they're even more boring because they
They're
surround them
worse because they're Mary Sue.
surround them with
They have no
really,
stakes.
yeah,
It's
no
it's really
stakes.
it's really awful. Like it's so denigrating to any human being if you give them this apparently perfect character who can do absolutely anything and has absolutely no reason to exist because nothing will possibly happen to this person because of
Right.
some perceived, I don't know, like notion of systemic God knows what. I mean, it's ridiculous. Who wants to watch this sort of stuff? I don't, like, nobody.
Well, so the thing about visual though is that, like, people will get sucked in. Like, I have this problem with books sometimes. Like, I'm reading a book, so I reread, out of curiosity, I reread the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis because I read it when I was younger, and I remember reading Out of the Silent Planet, and I'm like, halfway through the book, I'm like, I kept reading. I was like, do I actually like this book, or am I
It's not
just
the best. It's not
no?
the best.
That,
The
but
second and third are better.
yes, much. So I plowed my way through the first one again, and when I read it the second time, now that I already knew, I was like, oh yeah, I was just trying to get. But the problem is, once you invest, like, you kind of, like, even just out of curiosity, morbid curiosity, you kind of want to know. So these things are still on life support, these bad stories, because just the same way reality television works. It's like
Yeah.
you kind of want to know, like, even though you shouldn't want to know, you
Well,
kind of want to
I think we're
know.
getting to the point where it's gonna have to just it's killing itself already. I mean, these kinds of stories, they can't go anywhere anymore. It's just it's totally the snake eating itself. So I think at some point people are just gonna stop watching.
Well, yeah, like, well, Disney has like become a literal Ouroboros. They're like
Yes.
literally digging up their own tail, and eating it. Like
Yeah.
they're with the live action versions that are being like, they're just farming their own content to death, and
It's
it's
not good.
it and they're so bad. They're just so bad. And I don't even know what to do. We could do a whole podcast on just why Disney's terrible now.
Yes, we could.
They've always been a little weird. Let's be honest. There was always that pressure in the 20th century to like that sort of that bad sense of escapism. We're like, we got to give people a happy ending. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
they
no,
paid their money
I
to
do
get
know
here.
what you mean, and in
Yeah.
fact, there was a great series that Malcolm Gladwell did on this subject, where he rewrote the Disney version of the Little Mermaid, and his version was even worse. Um, but in the process of talking about why he hated the Disney version of it and why he wants to write a new version of it, he went through kind of the history of Disney and the history of fairy tales and how people tend to interact with fairy tales throughout history. And it became very clear that the Mouse House from the beginning was doing something that was not fairy tales, that they were mining the genre, because genre, it's not a genre, it's a way of community, but they were mining it not to retell that story for a new time, but to capitalize on something for the sake of money, or for the sake of, I don't know, cultural relevance or something. And it's not going anywhere good.
No, they don't know. People don't know. They can't see clearly anymore. They don't have categories. The categories have they're all been told that the categories were just constructs.
Yeah.
And so the weird thing about this is you've been told all these categories, they're just constructs. So what are we going to do about these constructs? Because I don't believe they're constructs, but what are we going to do about them? Well, I'm going to choose, instead of having a communally decided construct that individuals follow, individuals are going to decide a construct that the community has to follow. It's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, that's way
Yeah.
worse of an idea. We're not
Yes.
even outsourcing this construct to like the general populace anymore.
Right.
Where
That's
just one person gets to tyrannize the rest of the civilization with their construct
Yeah.
that's made up. It's such a weird plan. There's a
Yeah.
better future ahead. Like,
No,
listen,
I
I get what spawned some of this for certain personality types, where they see a problem, like they're and the solution isn't obvious in front of them yet, right? And the solution's not there, but also at the same time, like it's going to get better, but the people aren't presenting the proper solution to the problem yet. The problem of
because they don't
mankind.
even realize that there is a problem,
Yeah.
or they don't realize, they only realize it maybe instinctually. I want to bring in some of the I want to bring in our people now if they want to ask
Yeah, come on.
questions. So Elise and Seraphim, come on in, and if you guys have any questions. Oh, Nicholas Medich just appeared. How about that? We have a few in the chat, so Seraphim, if you want to just repeat the questions that you asked, that's fine.
Oh, well, yeah, I was just making notes to myself so I wouldn't forget stuff.
Okay.
I mean, so I'll just go through them briefly. Well, briefly. That with me, that's really a long shot. And when it comes, you talked about your sort of your appreciation of Hymns of Paradise.
Yeah.
And I was just it reminded me of a spiritual poet I've recently come across that I was not really aware of until recently. It's an Armenian poet, Gregory of Narak. I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote a book called The Book of Lamentations. It was, I mean, it's like sort of, I'm not really sure where it fits within Orthodoxy because it's Armenian, but then again, its publication history involves a lot of stuff from the EP. I mean, his press under the Turks, put it out like in the 1700s, and it's used like a prayer book. There have been claims of miraculous healing from it. It's like a book of needs in poetic form. But what I was saying about it was that it has a similar spiritual vision as Hymns of Paradise, but the sensibility, the poetical sensibility of Walt Whitman, who wrote in catalogs. I sing The Body Electric, I sing this, I sing that. And so Greg of Iraq has these marvelous streaming catalogs of all, whatever his topic is. It just goes on and on and on. It just builds and builds and builds, sort of like maybe like an Actus in a way. But it just, anyway, I don't know if you'd ever, okay, that's first
Oh,
thing.
that sounds like a kind of thing I'd be really into. I mean, well, we referenced Walt Whitman. I mean, I also love too. He had a lot of blood and sap in his story. When I talked about something blue, it's like, I mean, even if you take one of his like pop ones, like "Oh Captain, My Captain," like that thing's got some real blood and sap in it. Like you feel it. But Gregory of Narek, I'll have to check that out. The thing about Hymns in Paradise that really got me, that structure is so fascinating. Like it would never occur to me, like in modern times, to write a theological poem. Like it never had occurred to me until I started to read them. Like the idea that's a way to understand it better, like in a sense. But what was so cool about that book, so Hymns in Paradise, one of the things that really struck me, because he had mentioned The Little Mermaid a little minute ago, and The Little Mermaid starts out with, I think, which is the proper prologue, in the sense that the mother's dead. And so what's at stake for the main character is she doesn't understand her own nature. Like she doesn't understand her own body, and she thinks she can become human, which is why I think Charles Dickens wrote it originally, right? Where it's a tragedy. She dies. Like I think that's the proper ending.
Hans
Like
Christian Andersen. Hans
Christian
Yeah.
Andersen. Oh, that's right.
And
I get those two backwards.
It's very,
Okay.
it's a very violent and very sad, very tragic story.
Yeah, because it should be. Like, okay, so that's like what happens when you, and so, but that's the story of mankind, in the sense that if you look at the feminine structure of paradise, like as a thing we've been separated from, that we're kept from, by a flaming sword that points in all directions. It, like, that book made sense in the sense that it, as he described paradise, and as I like could picture myself in it, you kind of realize like there's a type of mother you've been detached from in your nature your whole life, where you have all these yearnings for paradise, and to understand it, because in a way it's the place you're designed for. And so I thought that was such a cool thing in that story, or that what it meant to me as I read it. But I think some of that's also captured in the form and the way he climbs the mountain. I don't know. It's above my ability to describe really what I got from that. And I love things like that. I love that you put right here. Wait, is this you again? Poem begins with a lump in the throat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I never heard that quote, but that's it.
Well, you mentioned something about writing to the emotion or something, and when you said that, it reminded me of that quote from Frost.
Oh, that's good. I'm gonna keep that one with me for life. That's really good, because yeah. So like me, like I know I'm onto something if I start to, like, because I'm not like, I'm really a goofy, happy-go-lucky guy in real life, but when I sit down and make music, sometimes I tear up, and like that's when I know it's gonna be something worth recording.
Right. I mean, you write back to that, and if it recreates that same feeling in you, you're onto something.
Hopefully it does it for someone else too. Yes, that's good.
I mean, Tolkien was crying when he wrote The Field of Cormallen. The scene after the destruction of the ring, where the minstrel comes out and sings the lay of Frodo and the Nine Fingers. And Sam goes, this, because that's what Sam wanted to hear, right? That was his one desire, was to be able to actually, what would it be like if we were characters in the narrative poem?
Yeah.
And then it happened. And Mike, speaking of the space trilogy, one of the great scholars of the space trilogy, a guy named Dr. Michael Ward, who wrote the book Planet Narnia. It's a great book. He delved into Tolkien scholarship recently, and he has this really long article, and it's a little bit too scholarly at some points, where he talks about what is the actual climax of the Return of the King. What's the high point? Is it the destruction of the ring? No, it's not. It's the scene after, where where they wake up, they're in a field, and everybody is praising them to the skies, and the minstrel comes out, and they become characters within the tale that they lived. So they are the story of their heroic journey is told out loud in front of them, and it becomes this kind of meta thing where Tolkien is layering the structure of the of the narrative poem within the narrative poem that he's writing himself. And it's Michael Ward saying that's the point. That's the point where the climax of
Right.
Lord
I
of the
was
Rings
wondering how
is.
they were going to do that in the movie, and they didn't. They just transferred that moment, which wasn't bad. So they transferred that moment to the no, you bow to no one moment, right? So that's the kind of
Yes.
like, because I both of those moments are sort of a different interpretation of receiving a well done, my good and faithful servant.
Yes. Yes.
And so that was in the movie, that works visually to see all these people bow to these tiny, little hobbits. I think that worked. That transferring all that momentum that moment.
It was in Minas Tirith, right, in the movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is he initially thought of writing that scene in Minas Tirith. Tolkien did, apparently. Like, according to his notes, that scene after the destruction of the ring, where Frodo wakes up and everybody praises him, was going to be in Minas Tirith. But then he changed it and decided to put it into this field in Ithilien. And I haven't gotten to the end of this article yet. He's making the argument that this place, which is never mentioned at any other point in the rest of the novel, we don't actually ever encounter that place until they are there, until they're lying there, and everybody. It's very close to the field, to the pool where Gollum gets captured, but it's not. We don't actually encounter it. So in terms of narrative structural laws, he broke all of them. You're not supposed to have the climactic moment in a place that you've never encountered before as a character or as a reader. You're supposed to put it into a place that has emotional resonance. And yet he broke that rule, and he made it as one of the most intense and most beautiful moments of the entire
yeah, I didn't think about that fact of the location. No, I didn't. I don't have a good sense of geography when I read books. Like, unless I'm like without the maps in those books, I'm lost. Like, as far as where the heck they are on a map. Thank God for the maps in the books.
Sure.
No, I had no sense of that.
Well, I have one other follow-up question or a comment. You mentioned that you have become wearied of over-metered music.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever listened to any genetic music? It's where they take like a strand of DNA and transcribe it into music. Some stuff. I mean, there's like a thing on YouTube that's like a section of humpback whale DNA transcribed as music, and it's really quite. Yeah. What's interesting? One of the first persons to do this, because there's 8 base pair sequences, so you get you can assign them as notes and then just sort of move them up and down as fits. But I was a Korean scientist, one of the first ones I think that started playing with this, and he noticed that certain genetic strands reminded him of Mozart. And when he did an analysis, sort of a transcription of some cancer cells, it sounded like Wagner.
Oh my God, that's amazing! I love that. Oh my gosh, you just made my ear. You just made my ear. That's fantastic. Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, so is that a joke, the whole thing, or is that a real thing?
No,
either way, that's like 2 levels of good. If it's not you're not telling that as a joke.
It's totally a real thing.
Wow.
Oh both of them are real. Both of them. But it is funny.
Oh my goodness.
That is the perfect nerd joke. That if it was just a joke, that would be perfect. Oh my gosh. So yeah. Okay. Well, there we go. No, I haven't heard that. I don't know. There's a part of me, like, I kind of like handmade music in the sense that, like, one of the things we're talking about with I have like, I mean, I don't want to brag about myself, but I have like dead on locked timing. So I can lock to a click track identically, and I can move where I sit on the click track. So if I'm playing with drums, I can decide I want to hit behind the kick drum and on the snare drum, like as I'm playing an instrument, right? So I can get it to where it almost sounds computer perfect on my own, but you can still, like, there's something different about it, right? There, you can still tell there's a person involved. And so I haven't gotten that much into like any of the AI generated music or any of this pattern stuff like that, because I don't know. I kind of want to hear a person's perspective in the music, and I also want to hear a actual performance by a person. I don't connect to stuff when it doesn't sound human anymore. So like the movie I'm making too, the same thing. Like we're intentionally, like, there are things we could bring up to a more realistic level, but we're stopping at a point. but we're not going below a point either. That's how we're kind of creating a look for it and a vibe, whether people enjoy it or not. I don't know. So far, so good. But so that's one of the things that I do, because like I want to see that something's handmade in the end. And I'm just so tired of like sort of the cookie cutter world that I relish that the idea that someone's disciplined themselves to make something perfectly imperfect, like imperfect in all the right ways. So that's kind of where I'm at. Sorry if I keep looking up, because like I have to look up to see the people now. So I don't know. It always looks weird on a video talking to someone in there. Okay.
Yeah, the link I posted is the whale music.
Oh, right. Very cool.
Yeah. At least it's supposed to be.
At least it's supposed to be. Well, check it out. I'm going to watch it now that you did this. I have to see it. So.
But yeah, I'm not sure what process they go through, but it is very unmetered, but still very nice.
Well, I'll see, because there is a trick to doing this kind of stuff too. So there are composers that will, like, you can hire them and they'll be like, I'm going to take your name and turn it into a song, and they'll assign values for the letters. And there is a certain amount of flexibility in how they pick and what they pick and when and what key they put it in, where you can kind of consistently make something pretty good out of it. But is it really their name we're hearing? Like, because they did have to assign an interpretive structure to the thing to do it. So I'm interested to see how coherent it could actually be if they're not implying too much of an interpretive structure to it.
Yeah, well, pity the customer named Bob. So
yeah, I'm in. I'm saving the link.
Yeah.
Thanks. You gave me two things I need here. I need that quote for life. Okay, go ahead.
I'm glad you got something out of this as well.
That's what I get it. Well, I think out loud too. So just talking, I understand what I'm doing better. So I'm one of those people. I mean, I hung out with Jonathan. John and I hung out in person. Like, I don't know. We talked probably for like 15 hours straight. It had to be so annoying for my wife and my daughter. But I am exhausting to be around, because I will not stop unless you stop me talking and asking questions. So
it was his video that I first encountered your music when he was talking to you. I like the Saints and Dead Horse. I really like that.
Oh, thank you so much. Dude, his channel's been so great. Like, such quality people come in. Like, I can tell, like, everybody knows what they're hearing. Like, and so as soon as I started appearing on his channel and a few channels like that, like, I noticed there was a quality jump in my YouTube comments. I was like, what's going on here? There's some people that know a little too much about what I'm doing. And it was because of his followers and the people that he appeals to they have a different type of intuition to begin with. So I relish those type of fans. So I appreciate the support and the love.
Now here's a rod, like when you're riding, I guess maybe with your Queen of the Night stuff, it's like, I mean, I know for myself, it's like sometimes when I'm trying to capture a certain mood, or it's like I need background music. Sometimes I'll spend hours searching through classical music. It's just like I want the soundtrack to what's in my head, and so I will look for that, and that way, and then that can sort of like keep me coming back to that place until I get whatever I'm trying to write out of my system on the paper.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of people that do that. Like, I mean, there's famous directors that do that, obviously, like, George Lucas would use Korngold for his temp scores. So, John Williams' composition sounds very much like that. And, I'm not a huge fan of Quentin Tarantino, but he, basically does his movies like a music video to songs. And so that's a big part of it. Me, no, I don't do that at all. I have, I wouldn't say it's perfect pitch in the sense that I know the names of notes when I hear them. I can, if someone asks me and wants me to tell them back. But I have, so I don't need a tuner to tune a guitar, or Kate and I both, like, we can start a song in the right key vocally before we're ever given a chord, like, all the time. So I always have in all songs from my childhood, I can just blurt them out in the right key before they start. So that's bootstrapped itself up to something very nice, is that I can write in my head without ever picking up an instrument, which is very efficient. And it's annoying for my family sometimes, because they'll ask me a question and they said something important and I'm writing a song in my head. So it's a problem as well too. So, but no, I don't do that at all. I actually listen to very little music. I will take very long road trips with zero sound. Like I'll stockpile podcasts too that I want to get to, and because I use my ears all day long, so I can't. So no, I listen to very little music and almost nothing that sounds like anything I do. So that's
Have you ever listened to Traveler?
Traveler.
Traveler.
Okay. Hold on. Someone just suggested this to me. What about it?
John
He was
Tavener?
an Orthodox opera writer. He wrote like
Yeah.
St. Mary, and I personally,
Okay,
I
that's
can't.
why.
It's like I like Counting Coup that he's one of ours, but I can't say I really like his music.
I like Benedict Sheehan's stuff. It's awesome. Yeah, we have that going on in the house a lot. He gets a lot of airplay in my house. He has no idea.
Just wait till he comes up with some of his new stuff. Have you heard his Charles Dickens thing? It's coming. I'm not
already
sure if
out?
it's come out yet. I'm not sure if it's come out yet.
No, I'm just on his new thing. And we have his Vespers too. So but I thought that was funny because I didn't realize you were a choir master. And then I pulled up a video of his, and Steve from my church, St. Michael, was singing. He's got an incredible voice.
Great,
Steve, my gosh, I need to put that guy in a movie. But
yes, you do.
he's such a character. He's got such a distinct look. It's so great. I love it. But I saw you. I was like, oh, there he is. And then you were taking pictures at some point instead of singing. Like, what was that about?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Like, you're the guy I think would stay in the moment. And there you are with like an iPhone taking video or pictures.
It must have been for something. I don't know.
And I just want to make fun of you for a second. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you ever?
All right.
Okay, never mind. I've monopolized enough.
No, it's not that. It's just late.
Yeah.
And I have to go and actually get some sleep before the kids wake me up at 5 o'clock in the morning, which is what it normally is. So last questions, and then we'll call it a night.
Well, okay. Did you ever work with David Braun?
No, I work with myself mostly.
Oh, do you know who David Braun is?
No.
No,
I'm the worst with names and stuff. You don't know how many times I've met people and people are like, do you know this guy? I'm like, no. And then they're like, oh, he says you met him. I'm like, oh, show me a picture. I'm like, oh yeah, I know this guy. He's great.
He's the former lead singer from Great Glass Elevator.
Okay.
Which was an Orthodox psychedelic rock group. Anyway,
he's in the OCA. I met this guy.
Yeah, but he after he left, he went to do animations, work on Robot Chicken. But he does like stop motion animation stuff, and you don't like making movies.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about now. Thank you. I did know. I haven't worked with him. No, I'd love to. I want to so behind the scenes, I think we're trying to get together a large collective, and I'm going to employ everybody into a large project eventually. I'm fundraising. I've got a project I wanted to do for a while. That is going to take all hands on deck. But we'll see how this one goes. So I'm just trying to prove myself as I go. I've got a long life plan ahead of me, even though the beard's getting gray. So I'm going to try to fill the world with whatever I can. I think is beautiful until I die. And then, as long as God lets me do it.
Amen.
But yeah,
Amen,
I'm all
brother.
into collaborating. I'm into collaborate. I don't collaborate enough. That's what's sad about what I do now, but I'm too efficient. It's so sad. Like I made the mistake of becoming an island in a sense where I'll do all my own, all the orchestrations, everything in Queen of the Night I'm doing myself and playing most of the parts. So I do them very quickly too. That's the problem. I can do probably 2.5, 3 minutes of full score a day, without I don't know, without taking a lunch break. It's pretty fast. So that it really slows me down to collaborate so with other musicians, which is sad. I just did the other night. I went and jammed with a bunch of guys, and it took me back. And I'm watching the Beatles documentary Get Back, which makes me want to play, but also makes me unimpressed with the Beatles. Have you guys seen this thing?
No, I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
But there's something about you that thinks like, oh, it'd be intimidated to be in the room with the Beatles, and you're watching them play, and you're like, no, I could totally hang with these guys. They're just lost. They're just absolutely lost musically. They come to something, they have good intuition, so they stumble to something amazing, but they don't go right after it, like very quickly at all. It takes them a long time of goofing around to get there. So anyway, did anyone else have a question who hadn't got a chance to ask, or just hanging along for the ride?
Yeah.
No, I just realized I have to listen. I have to go through your whole catalog. So
Oh,
that's what I'm
yeah.
gonna have to do. So I will say the little bit I've listened to reminds me of old Decemberists.
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely.
The crane wife.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the same sense. I mean, you're not nihilistic like the Decemberists, but
Right.
it reminds me of that album.
Oh, very cool. No, I really liked what they were doing. They were a little more indie than I was, than I am. So I have sort of an aversion to things that are kind of cool. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you? I don't know. I feel like there's a part of like the world where it's like, I don't know. Sometimes things like it took me a while to get into December because people were kind of presenting like the new cool band, and I was like, that's never a band I like. And then I listened to them. I was like, I actually like these guys. Okay, I was wrong. But yeah, I have this aversion to like because the music industry just decided to replace rare with cool because cool was something they could tell you, and rare was something that had to happen. So, I'd rather try to be rare and awesome than cool.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm a little old for cool now, so we'll pass that one by.
Well, I hope that you reach your desired number of views for Queen of the Night, and we'll do everything we can to push it along and to let people know about it.
It's on Facebook too. For some reason on Facebook it took off.
Oh,
I don't know
interesting.
why.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Facebook TV is on
Okay.
everybody's TV now, and so I've been getting a ton of traffic through Facebook, way more than YouTube. I did not expect
That's
that.
weird.
So,
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
That's
Well,
weird.
I first saw your video from Frederica Matthews Green.
oh, I was so sweet of her to share that. I couldn't believe that. Like I had no idea. I was in an email thread with her. I didn't even know. I didn't even because I don't look at my email. So apparently she got it word about it. So yeah, she's great. She's the internet's grandma that everyone needs.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yes.
My
Yeah.
God, she's the greatest. I want to be
All right,
like her when I grow up.
Yeah, well, there we go. That's a wonderful place to end. Everybody should want to be like Frederico when they grow up. And
If you get anything from this message is from this talk is be like Frederica Matthews Green.
Neil, thank you so much for taking the time and
You bet,
coming out to
man.
talk
Thank you
with
for
us.
having me come on. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm
Great.
sorry that more people didn't show up, but they'll watch it all on.
Oh no, that's fine. I mean, I like these people. I do. I wouldn't know there was supposed to be more if you didn't say it that way. So here we go.
There you go. This was all. It's exclusive. That's right. It's a small
Exclusive.
Small group.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm a people person.
This might get you close to the word cool, so you might want to be careful.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Telling people we
Careful.
should all be like Frederica Matthews Green might only make me cool in a very limited circle. So, yeah, but
right,
I think
everybody.
that's the coolest thing you could be.
There you go.
All right.
All right. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Send it to her. All right. Catch you guys later.
Okay. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.